many of you can dig back into your memory and think of a film that you may have seen years ago. It actually was released in 1930. And it starred the inimitable Groucho, Harpo, Beppo, right? The Marx Brothers. And the name of the film, Animal Crackers. And smack in the middle of it, there is a kind of a dialogue, including a song between Groucho and I think her name is Margaret Dumont. She was a big star in those days. Hello, I must be going. I cannot stay, I came to say. I must be going. I'm glad I came, but just the same, I must be going. And on it goes. And it's a nonsense song because in the end, it reminds me of that line Groucho is also famous for, I refuse to join any club that would have me as a member. Now you might be saying to yourself, oh, he's been out in the sun too long. What is he talking about Groucho for when we're celebrating the Ascension? But maybe you figured out, hello, I must be going, is a perfect way of understanding what we just heard described to us in the readings. After all, in pictures of the Ascension over the ages, sometimes all you get to see are Jesus' footies, you know, hanging out in the clouds. And all these people, including his mother, looking up and saying, what? And then the two men in white, who appear every once in a while, say, what are you looking at, you Galileans? He's not going away, really. He's going to come back. You will see him in the same way. Which is kind of like first century doublespeak. Hello, I must be going. Hello, I must be going. If you stop and think of the human beings surrounding Jesus in those days, it is perfectly understandable that they were put to the test time after time after time. Here is this remarkable teacher. He's healing people. He's even raising his friend Lazarus from the dead. Also, he raises from the dead a little girl and a widow's son. And then all of a sudden, the whole world caves in on him and on them, because after all, they're his friends, right? And what do they do? With the exception of the women in the little band around Jesus, they all go running scared, and they disappear. When we're reading through the lessons in Holy Week, Jesus is there only with his mother and 5 or 6 or 7 of his women disciples. Where are all the rest of the guys? They're hiding, and they remain hiding. And even when those women go to the tomb on the morning of the 3rd day and find it empty, and again those 2 guys in white say, what are you looking for? He's not here. He already went back to Galilee. Go tell the others. Which they go back and they say, the Lord is risen. We were told this. The tomb is empty. What response do they get? You're hysterical. You're making it up. You're beside yourself with grief, or delusional, or you're women. They were the first apostles of the resurrection. They were the first to believe that the tomb really was empty. And it's interesting that in all of the interactions between Jesus risen from the dead and his disciples later on, he never has to explain to the woman what's going on. But to the men, he has to say, hey, what do you got to eat? I'm hungry. I'm not a ghost. Or he has to call them, you know, they're out in the boat fishing, remember? You know, he's got breakfast on the fire there, he's roasting fish, and he's got bread and everything. And they're looking and they're saying, is it a ghost? Who is it? You know, is this somebody playing games with us? Never a mention of the women. They know what's going on. That's why we celebrate women today, by the way. They know what's going on. So the rest of us, well, sisters, we include you too. What are we supposed to make out of this? We're supposed to make out of this that though our brains tell us that we're alone in the world with all this crap going on, with all this nonsense and anger and division, misery, we tend to sometimes think, well, God's left us. You know, he went back up there. When my grandma used to take me on the trolley to this service in Yonkers, I'd say to her, what are we going to church for? It's not Sunday. She said, this is the day Jesus went upstairs. And this is from a woman who was an immigrant, only knew walk-ups on the Lower East Side. No elevator. She wasn't until, she only rode on an elevator when she was a senior citizen. Is he gone or isn't he? Hello, I must be going means that I'm still here. Well, how am I here? Well, I'm looking at how he's here. And if I had a mirror, I could include myself in that, but I can't. He's here in us. You know, when we say, wouldn't it be great if someone, fill in the blank, that's the place for our name. Wouldn't it be great if someone thought about affordable housing? Wouldn't it be great if someone thought about health care on the weekends? Wouldn't it be great if somebody thought about the fact that some people at this point in the year get laid off and have a hard time making their bills? Wouldn't it be great if we understood that our name is in that blank? And that's how Jesus works. There's no magic to it. I mean, you can think that there is, but in fact, the magic is what we're able to come up with. Because every one of us says, I can't solve the problems of the world. Nobody expects you to. Certainly God doesn't. But with a sister or a brother or more, that's when things begin to happen. And all of you know that from this little community here at St. Barnabas, but also from the larger community of Borrego that we're part of. You know that when things happen, it's because somebody says, we got to do something about this. We can't let people live like this. We can't let people be hungry, right? There's a better use for this space. There's a better use for this land. There's things that we can do together that none of us could do alone. That's the whole gospel. That's the whole thing we've been hearing since, believe it or not, last November, or the end of November, beginning of December, when it was Advent. When we start reading about everybody waiting for this great little baby to be born, and then through all the months, you know, we hear about him and what he's doing. And by the way, we will hear about that all summer long. Jeannie and I will hear it in Danbury, Connecticut, where we go to church, and you will be hearing it here. The very same readings. But the readings are not there just to be listened to. The readings are there to be lived. And that's what the Ascension is. It isn't just something that says, well, God's in his heaven, and boy, the world is a mess. It's God is in heaven, and heaven is in us, and we can do something about the world. Maybe we can't solve the problems of the entire country, or even the county, but we can, in some way, inject ourselves into the lives of a person whose name we know, someone who lives on our block, someone who we shop with. Amen.